So, very warm welcome, everyone. And so this is the second of our, what can we say, explorations of the main teachings which are at the heart of our Karma Kagyu lineage. So last week we had Mahamudra as the teachings on mind that come to us from Saraha via Maitripa, Mapa, and of course, the long line of the Karmapas. Now, I didn't talk about that long line of the Karmapas very much last week. I hope we can take it for granted that after Mapa, then we have Milarepa, Gampopa, first Karmapa, then an unbroken line. So today we go on to the second main, let's say, unique component of our Karma Kagyu lineage, which is called the path of skillful means, Taplam in Tibetan. And these are the various tantric transmissions from Tilopa. I eat something called Paleolithic bread, which is full of tiny seeds. And just before coming online, you know, when things go down the wrong hole, you know, you're not supposed to inhale bread. So if I sound a bit rough in the throat, I'm not unwell. I just inhale too many seeds. So anyway, let's start today with a very, very excellent motivation. We'll do the prayers we usually do, except that I'll do the prayer to Vajradhara, because that is absolutely perfect for any teaching about lineage, the Mahamudra lineage. So please turn your hearts in love and in care for all our fellow beings, and in particular for those very important in your lives, in your karma, your parents, your children, your siblings, and those who've really benefited you and those who've really harmed you. We're here for all of them. And between you and me, we're particularly here because they are part of us. Our own psychology, our mental landscape is deeply populated by these people whose presence has been the story of this life. We've had so many lives. Each one has been peopled by a very, very different population. This time round, it's those. So we need to carry them to liberation, because we need to liberate our own mind from the extreme weight, density of their presence inside us. So anyway, and then we extend that to all conscious beings. Sonje chodon soje chonomla joncho badu dane chapsunje dagi jinso jipe sonomje drola penchira sonje druparasho samchan tamche dewa dang dewe jodang tempare choche dongal dang dongal je jodang shalwara choche dongal me pe dewa tampa dang nen shalwara choche yerin chadan netan shalwe tanyom chempola ne pare chore che Doje changchen telo narodang mapa mela choche kampopa tu sumsheja kunchen kamapa cheshi chongje chupa senamdang Ritat sasum padam chupaso sablam chaja chela nyanepe nyame chukanda poka chula sovanda soka chula manom chupa zeno namtare jinchilo shenlo gomche kampara sumpa shen seno kunla chashen me padam Sede de ta chupi gongchen la nekur shenpa me pari jinchilo Mogu gongche gore sumpa shen menga te go jepe la mala Jundu sowan depe gongchen la chumen mugu jewara jinchelo. Yengme gongche ngushira sompa shen gansha tope ngo somade. Macha de Karajopi Gomchenla, Gomcha Lodan Shalwari Chinchelo, Namtong O Chukrasumba Shen, Chian Mayen Chian Chawala, Mangaropa Chawe Gomchenla, Kode Yerme Topara Chinchelo. Alen Sawe Lama Rinpoche, Daso Chiwara Pende Denshola. Gajen Chempo Gune Jesonte Kuson Tuchin Madrup Sandu Sol. Thank you. Well, today will be very much a similar format to last week. We're looking at these tantric transmissions, which make the Karma Kagyu the unique lineage it is. We need to look at that in a technical teaching way in terms of history and the lineage and what's in that lineage in terms of the teachings, where they came from, who they came from and why. So all of that's the outer story. And then the more important thing, second part, the inner story. What's all that about in terms of us and our mind and our own journey to enlightenment? Not something out there in other people, in history, in the past, happening somewhere now in India, Sikkim, Nepal, happening somewhere inside us. Probably happened because we're here together on this topic. Probably happened in past lives. It's part of your history somewhere, a connection with this. And whatever happens in this life, interesting life, this one, you've got many more lives to come. And my main purpose in sharing these teachings is in the hope that you connect with the depth of the realities, the universal realities, nothing to do with history and people out there. The truth of you, the truth of our mind, the truth of our energies, our feelings, everything. The hope that you connect in the most fruitful and in the most efficient way possible, which is what these teachings are about. Efficiency, practice, efficiency. So first, I have to do it, otherwise I lose my job. I don't know who's going to fire me, but I've got the feeling, I'm not doing my job if I don't go through the historical thing. Always the way my teachers taught me was to zoom in from the bigger picture. So let's do that. Dharma, Buddhism. You all know it started with the Buddha in this world 2,500 years ago, more or less. You all know it went to Tibet, but not straight away. There were some 12 centuries before Buddha Dharma went from India up to Tibet. 12 centuries. 12 centuries. Now, a lot happened to Dharma in India in those 12 centuries. And if you were taking part in the Karmapa's teachings a few weeks ago, he spent almost a month trying to unravel all of that. As I said last week, he was going to talk about the origins of Vajrayana. And once he realized you can't really talk about that until you see how it emerged from the Buddha's teaching and how the Buddha's teaching emerged from what had already happened in India. Very advanced spirituality on all sorts of levels. So by the end of a month, he just got to the place where he was going to begin the actual talk he was programmed to give. It's amazing. And it's very complicated. So a lot happened in India, but then starting in the 8th century, or really in the 7th century, Dharma started to go to Tibet. In the 8th century, it went with a bang. With a bang. And as somebody who worked now for 50 years, pioneering bringing Tibetan Buddhism to the West, with the resources we had, I can really appreciate the bang with which Dharma went to Tibet. It had royal patronage, and the king was rich. Tibet was an empire at the time. All the money to build. They could do things like find the 50, 100 brightest kids in the country and send them off chaperoned to India to learn the language, to come back as translators. I started off, and I'm not a translator by training, but there was nobody else, so we had to learn to translate, to interpret. You just imagine the British government saying, oh, Tibetan Buddhism's come. We're going to find 50 brightest kids in all the schools and super train them, fast track them to be translators. He went to Tibet with the greatest spiritual guru, Padmasambhava, and with one of India's greatest scholars, Shantarakshita. So it had so much going for it. And so it was well implanted. The first Samye monastery was made and so on. But that didn't last long, because within 100 years, an anti-Buddhist king came along. His name was Bull's Horns in Tibetan, Langdama, and he destroyed it, very much like what was to happen when the Chinese came in 1959. Monasteries destroyed, all of the monks sent outside the borders of Tibet. And so after his reign, I mean, he was assassinated in the end, gradually those monks and lamas came back and they reestablished things. But the magnificence with which it came to Tibet was very crippled. So anyway, that gave rise to what we now call the Nyingmapa, or the original, the ancient teaching school. 8th century until 11th century. In the 11th century, there was a big wave of masters like Atisha and Mapa, who we looked at last week, who then revived Dharma in Tibet, a huge injection of Buddha Dharma and Tantra into Tibet. So we have this 3-4 century window when Dharma came to Tibet from India, a little bit from China, but what went to China had come from India anyway, so it's kind of round the corner and into Tibet. But then in the 12th century, Buddha Dharma disappeared from India. The roots that had nourished all the other Buddhist countries disappeared, mainly through the Muslim invasions of India, but also through the rise of Hinduism. So then, thereafter, Buddhism only existed in exile. This vision of what Dharma was in India, as the Karmapa said many times, we only have from the Tibetans. There is nothing from India itself about 17 centuries of Buddhism. Nothing. We only have what foreigners told us about what was going on in India. It's absolutely amazing. And we have what archaeologists find that was in stone. So anyway, we're zooming in. There was Dharma in India, and how that was, we know through the Tibetan version of how it was. In particular, we know that whatever came from India up into Tibet came, well, it depends how you translate it, came as either 8 chariot loads Chariot's a kind of a nice word. Cartloads might be a better translation, although the word looks like chariot. And these gave rise to the 8 main dharma lineages that came into Tibet. 8 of them. You might know that today there are 4 main dharma lineages in Tibet. The other 4 didn't disappear. They disappeared through being integrated into the others. So we're looking at these 8 great cartloads of teachings that came from India to Tibet. 8 cartloads of teachings called the 8 great chariots. Okay, forget that for a moment. We'll come back in a second. Now, something we need to look at is capacity. It's a Tibetan word you may have come across, and it is yana, like Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Some people translate it as vehicle, but it actually means capacity. Let's make it real. What you can take. How much can you take? It means literally, etymologically, how much you can carry. So, if you're just wearing shorts, you can carry stuff in your pockets. If you've got a few more clothes, an anorak and something else, you've got more pockets. You can carry more. If you've got a backpack, you can carry some slightly bigger things and more supplies. And then if you've got a bicycle, you can go faster with the same load. If you've got a motorbike with big pannier on the side, more. And then if you've got a car, and then if you've got a truck, and then if you've got a US military transport airplane, then you can take a lot. People are different. I've seen this all my life in Dharma centers and interpreting for lamas. When somebody comes along and they want, please, can you give me some teaching, give me some help? So different. Some come with an incredible baggage from past life. Some an incredibly heavy baggage. A lot of, you're going to have an interesting time plowing their way through the difficult karma they carry. Some come with an incredible dharma baggage where they are so ripe. They hear the words of dharma and it's like coming home. It's like nectar. I've wanted to hear this all my life. When they do the practices, it's a kind of relief. You feel like a fish that finally found water or whatever it is. And then some people have a very, very busy life. They can't do much. They don't have much practice time. Some people have a lot of practice time, but they've got huge egos. So you have to be very careful what you give them because it's going to foster the wrong things. People are so different, and their capacity, what you can give them in terms of teachings, how well, how purely, how sincerely they can hold the teachings and treasure them and practice them is really a huge topic. So this word yana means what of all the Buddha's teachings you can take. So this is why I sent you, and I think you've all got it through the post, through the emails. Now, where would that be? Here. Somebody raise a hand if you can see this on screen. Yeah, good, thank you. What I need to do is to, here we are. So we've got Sutra yana. That means the yana, or the sets of teachings that we call sutra. Sutra means I can talk about it, teacher can talk about it, it fits into words, which means it fits into ideas, and we can learn it as ideas. Anything you can blah, blah, blah about, you can think about, and the thinking and the blah, blah, blah can get very deep, very complicated, we call Sutra. Within Sutra, we've got two yanas, Hinayana and Mahayana. So we're not going there today. In other courses, you've learned about them. Hinayana, Hina means smaller, because basically the Buddha's teaching somebody how to help themselves, full stop. How to purify their mind. It's called Hina, lesser yana, because you can help one person, yourself. And that's fantastic. You learn how to stop damaging other people. You learn how to stop damaging the world. You learn how to stop damaging yourself. You find what peace, harmony, ethics, right conduct, all the Eightfold Path. It's wonderful. That can be explained, that can be learned, that can become a set of values. And then meditation, you can help yourself. Mahayana, the great yana, are the teachings and the practices that not only teach you to help yourself, but to help yourself in a way that you can care and help other people, other beings, more and more. So it's called the great jhana, because the number of people helped becomes 2, 3, 4, 10, 100, 1,000, depends. But all of that can be taught and learned and expressed and explained. Hinayana, Mahayana. When we go now a bit deeper on here, that's in 3 levels. The Shravakas, there is what the Buddha teaches, that psychological group and what they do with it, and they become arhats. There are the Pratyeka Buddhas, none of those around at the moment. We need to go back a couple of thousand years or fast forward to Maitreya Buddha's time. But anyway, there's their psychological type, the teachings the Buddha gives them, and the special sorts of arhats they become. And then there's the Mahayana, the bodhisattvas, and the bodhisattva teachings and practices that the Buddha gives those, and that we can understand, and that can be practiced and explained. So we've got 1, 2, 3 Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Mahayana. 3 different types of psychology, 3 very different types of ability to carry the teachings. Sutra. But then we have Tantra, outer Tantra, inner Tantra. Tantra is not something that's about being explained. Of course, you can explain the method. We can say some things. That's called the sutra level of Tantra. But the actual Tantra, you have to practice. And then the experience that comes through practice defies words. It happens, you benefit, you see life very differently. You grow, you mature, you understand more and more what it's all about. But that understanding and the levels of transformation you go through, and the experiences and the wisdom that comes out of them, it is all experiential. It works through a teacher, disciple, one-on-one guidance. So the only person who really knows what's going on inside you beside yourself, because there's no way you can express it to anybody else, is your teacher. It's why the guru, the teacher, is so vital in Tantra. So then we have the outer Tantras and the inner Tantras. If you look on the right, we've got 4 levels of Tantra: Kriya, Charya, Yoga, and Anuttara Yoga, highest yoga. Now, it's getting a bit complicated, but hang on in there. We're getting to the interesting bits later on. The outer Tantras are the Kriya Tantras, where it's mainly based on activities. Lots of stuff to do with purity. You change clothes a lot, you wash a lot. You only eat special foods, white foods. You avoid the onions and the garlic and meat. And so if you've done Yungne practice, you'll have a very good idea about Kriya. It's mainly based on activities. There is an element of meditation, of course, But the whole thing is about purifying your karma through activities of speech, where you only say prayers and mantras, and activities of body, and you keep your mind focused on those. Charya Tantra, Charya means conduct, is said to be a 50-50 sort of balance between activities. So there's still a lot of prescribed activities. You do this, you don't do that. And if you do the practice, you must be very careful. You make the tormas like you do that. Very precise. A lot of mindfulness in activity, but then also working with the mind, going inside, absorption, 50-50, more or less. And then there's Yoga Tantra, where the main emphasis is on the mind and all of the mumbo jumbo, the tra-la-la, you do this, you set up a shrine like this is the way you do the practice, this first, and all the details, tormas, instruments, all the rest, whatever there might be, is very secondary. It's there to support what you're doing with your mind, and in particular with your imagination, and so on. They're the three outer tantras. And then we get highest yoga tantra. So all of these levels of tantra went to Tibet. In the highest yoga tantra, then we get, this is like the story of the three bears in Goldilocks, father tantra, mother tantra, and non-dual tantra. In the Nimapa system, they're more or less called Mahayoga, Anuyoga, and Ati Yoga. So let's not get lost in the details, and it gets very interesting when you start comparing Nimapa and Kajupa and the language they use. We're not going there. This is just to say that now if you look on the right, we've got 9 yanas that suit 9 different psychologies and that have 9 different combinations of method, outer practice, deep inner mind practice. So when we're looking now at the transmissions from Tilopa, we're looking at Anuttara Yoga Tantra, the last 3, father tantras, mother tantras, and non-dual tantras. They all have their purpose. They suit, they're yanas, they suit different people. The father tantras put the emphasis on what's called skillful means. Some people need that more than anything else, or sometimes we need that. The mother tantras put more emphasis on shunyata, avoidance. Non-dual tantras, a balance of the two. So let's leave that one. And so Dharma went from India to Tibet. All 9 yanas, the teachings that correspond to those, went to Tibet. What went to Tibet with Tilopa was mainly the father, mother, and non-dual tantras. And from Tilopa, we get the Kagyu transmission. Now, Kagyu. Kagyu. Ju of Kagyu, Ju means lineage. Ka, which in the early translations, like Evans Wentz, they said whispered lineage. So in the early decades of Tibetan Buddhism, everyone saw that translation and they think the Kagyu teachers are all and whispering the secrets when they teach. Mind you, if you've got a few hundred people to whisper to, it gets a bit difficult. So it doesn't mean whispered. Ka is short for a quite long sentence, Kabakshi Jupa, and it means transmitted mastery. Transmitted mastery. It's like when, in the old days of guilds and apprentices, when you have a master woodworker or a master mason, and then somebody goes as an apprentice and they learn from somebody who's so expert. And then out of all those who learn, there'll be those who are really gifted. And not only do they learn everything their masters had to teach, sometimes they get even better at it. And then the master can say at one point, my son, over to you now. It's in your hands. And you need to look amongst your own students and find those who'll be able to carry on this knowledge, this skill, this learned skill through practice, and be worthy of the name of woodworker of this guild or mason of this guild or whatever it is. So this is what ka in Kagyu means. And in those transmissions from India to Tibet through Tilopa, we have 4 areas of mastery. And they've been handed down purely from master to student until today to our living gurus like the Karmapa, Taisitupa, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and so on. That is amazing, amazing. Tilopa was 1,000 years ago. It's not like Chinese whispers where bit by bit it totally gets distorted as it goes from one to the next. The real deal and the inner, the practical skill is handed down. And in particular, through the line of the Jawa Karmapas. So now the next thing we need to look at is why Tilopa and what was so special about him. And we need to look at, okay, he brings all the goodies from India, these masteries. Let's see how amazing he was. So I got to try and share another screen now. Now, this one's difficult screen because it's all too tiny, right? But you've got it somewhere in the literature I sent you, and you can check it out afterwards. So somewhere in there, which is, where's he gone? Tilopa, there he is. Can you nod if you see my little hand moving? Yeah, it's okay, good. Tilopa is there. So the life of Tilopa, we don't have time for today. He grew up gifted. He was visited as a child by what we call dakinis, and just like his successor Naropa, from an early age he was looked after by, let's say, invisible beings who sometimes become visible and manifest, very often as rather unpleasant elderly ladies. It's very difficult these days where you've got what is politically correct. I mean, why not rather unpleasant elderly men? And I suppose that happens too. But anyway, that's how the story goes. So even as a child, he got these visits and predictions. He started off as an ox herder, but then through his own past karma and so on, he ended up as a monastic. He ended up studying. He ended up being brilliant at his studies. And then the Dakini comes and gives him empowerment, and he sees a whole new dimension to Buddhism. And he knows he must leave his studies. He can't, because he's already needed by people. And in particular, he's got an uncle who's quite an eminent scholar. So to put a long story brief, the only way he can get out of all his monastic commitments is to look as though he's gone mad. And so he looks as though he's gone mad. He does things that any decent Buddhist would never do, like throwing the most sacred scripture, his uncle's favorite, into the river. The Dakini assures him that she'll get it back and it won't be unharmed. And then he starts acting crazily. And then the monastery doesn't want him anymore. He's free. So anyway, after that, through the Dakinis instructions, there are several phases of his life. We'll go through very quickly. Now, first, if you follow this, we go to the gurus of the four directions. It says in the text that he had 100 different gurus. Now, these numbers in Tibetan texts, if it says 100, it means more than 10, less than 100, right? More than 10 or 20. Doesn't necessarily mean he had 100, not 99, not 101. You don't read it like that. You'll see in the life of the Buddha, so often it says 500 arhats, 500 disciples. You translate that in English as hundreds of. So anyway, he had lots of gurus, and 20 of them were quite special. And he traveled all over Buddhist India, seeking, receiving, and because of his amazing inheritance from past lives, mastering very quickly various tantras. So if you look up here in the north of India, he had these teachers like Dengipa, who was one of his main ones, Darikapa, Lupa, famous Mahasiddhas. And then in the west, Lavapa, very, very important, Dombipa, former incarnation of Taisitupa, and so on and so on. In the east, Kamaripa, Sukhasiddhi, and then in the south, Matangi, very important in his life. And then from these, as you can see, marked in even smaller print, some of the main father tantras, for instance, from Nagarjuna, and then Poa, and teachings on clear light, clarity from Matangi, Mahamudra from Darikapa, and then dream yoga from Lavapa, and so on. In brief, he spent a part of his life traveling and receiving instructions. But then through all of those, a huge, in English you say the penny dropped, huge awakening where the primordial expression of mind as Buddha, we call it Vajradhara, appeared to him and put all of them into context, like all the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle make one picture. And if you ask anybody about Tilopa, any scholar in Tibet, they probably will have one sentence that comes to mind about Tilopa. He's kind of famous. Tilongala mi lama me me lama doji changchen in Tibetan means I, Tilopa, have no human guru. My guru is Buddha Vajradhara. Now this in India is like heresy. Even these days, you go to India, when people talk about their guru, you see their eyes go up, you feel something welling up from their heart, they put their hands together, their guru is like so special. They have an ability for respect we don't find much in the modern world. And you'll see amongst Tibetans, when they talk about their guru, they will sometimes stop, sometimes tears come to their eyes because of everything they've received. So why is Tilopa, who had these amazing Mahasiddha gurus, why on earth is he saying, I don't have human gurus, when we know he had 20 very vital ones and many, many more from all over India? It creamed all of the different tantras and lineages. He said that because once he got the full Buddha mind of Vajradhara, then he got the direct link, not Vajradhara to this teacher, to that teacher, to that teacher, and then eventually to him through a lineage directly. Doesn't really work, but in English they say he got it from the horse's mouth. So he saw through that. Now this is the important point for us. I'm making hand gestures and you probably can't see me. Let's finish with this diagram. So this yellow line is his gurus of the 4 directions. And then he gets, look, this yellow line from the top, this direct transmission from Buddha Vajradhara, which puts all of this into one integrated, meaningful picture. Then he goes to the northwest of India, to Pakistan, to Swat Valley, that kind of area, where he meets the Dakinis. And although he's nothing more to learn, he knows that they hold lineages that he needs to acquire for our benefit, for the benefit of future generations. So he gets the Dakini teachings from the Ujjain Dakinis, they're called, Uddiyana Dakinis. And then he also gets teachings on his way back from them, back into India, from what are called the formless Dakinis. They don't have forms, they don't manifest as Dakinis. So that's Tilopa, and all of this, from all those gurus, from Buddha Vajradhara, from Krishnacharya, from the Dakinis, he puts it all together into one powerful, meaningful package, which he passes on to Naropa, which then goes to Tibet through Marpa, and then down through Milarepa, and so on, to the present day. So that's kind of the history. Now, and we've done a few different numbers, like the 8 chariots and the 9 yanas and so on. So now we need another number. Anybody got any idea? Let's say 6. Okay, so all of these different lineages from his 100 gurus and from the Dakinis and from Buddha Vajradhara, he puts into 6 transmissions that are called, and that when he teaches Naropa, and that Naropa even fine-tunes to give to Marpa. So what came to Tibet and into our Kagyu lineage with Marpa as these transmissions of mastery are the 6 yogas. So what are we looking at here? And what I meant to say at the beginning, why are we looking at it? What's this got to do with you and me? Well, quite honestly, I don't know. These days, the 6 yogas are what we find practiced in the long retreats, 3 years, 4 years, long retreats that people do. They go into those retreats not to master these practices, but simply it takes that much time to receive them, just to receive the transmission properly and to learn the basic nuts and bolts of these main Kagyu practices. You might not be going to a 3-year retreat. I thought I was going to 3-year retreats when I was a boy, when I was a young Buddhist, and in the early 1970s, and doing my mundro and receiving very, very deep teachings. Then as soon as we will build one in Samiling, we were waiting for Karmapa's go-ahead. Then I thought, and Katya thought, we'd spend our lives in retreat like Milarepa. And it never happened. So I don't want to share and spoil all of this with my story, but nevertheless, just a little bit. The very first long retreat in Europe was set up by Carlo Rinpoche in France. And so, it's a long story. That was going to be where my first long retreat. And so we went and received the empowerments, and you've raised the money, which wasn't easy, and you've told your parents who've not got a clue about all of this, we're disappearing for 3 years, and so on. And then and it's a whole psychological thing of you just completely into the unknown. But then, at the last minute, two of Kala Rinpoche's long-term disciples turned up from Canada. And they said, we want to join, but there weren't enough rooms. So one day, Kala Rinpoche called us into his room and he said, I'm really sorry, but would you mind very much, because these are long-term disciples of mine, giving your place, and there'll be a retreat in Samiling soon, so maybe that's best. Well, there's sort of no choice. That was number one. Number two was Samiling's first retreat, and so that was built. I was already a Buddhist teacher at that time, training people for some of the things they do in retreat, for Ngondro and so on. I saw my room, and then there was a delay for me because Akon Rinpoche needed to go to Tibet. He was accompanying Taisitupa on his first trip to Tibet. All was planned, but the Chinese were very long giving a visa. So then the retreat was starting, and Akon Rinpoche said, never mind, when we get the visa, I need you to look after Samiling, he said to me. But when we come back, you can go in and catch up quickly because you've done the first year's practices anyway. So, okay. So then I was going into the retreat every day to give them Tibetan lessons, seeing my little room empty waiting for me. And then more and more delay, more and more delay. They got the visa, but by the time they got it, they wouldn't be back before the end of the first year. And the second year is total silence. You can't interrupt. So then it's sorry. Again, sorry, Ken, you can't go into this one. And my room became a dining room because they didn't have a dining room. So my little room became, and you know, in the Ngondro prayer, it says, today I invite as a guest in my feast to a feast of happiness, all sentient beings. So my room became the guest room for the other retreaters. And Akon Rinpoche said, I promise, I absolutely promise, you've missed 2 retreats. When the next retreat starts, you'll be in. And by the time the next retreat came, sorry, said, I need you too much. And so we were very busy at that time. And so I never did. So these practices, the 6 yogas of Naropa, of Tilopa, why am I telling you about them? Because you may never have the chance in this life to go into a long retreat. No, but I think any connection with these means that in a future life, even if it's not in a 3-year retreat, you will connect with what's at the heart of these practices, which is what we're coming to next. I really hope that. In the beginning, there weren't 3-year retreats. Tilopa, Naropa, the early days, people who got to these practices were committed for life. They had nothing else to do. Once you got into these practices, the rest of your life was retreat. Lay people didn't do those retreats. They gave up lay life and became yogis. But then the monasteries got bigger and bigger. And so some of the monks would do special studies. They go to Shedra or studies. And out of those, a tiny percentage, maybe just a couple to 3% of any big monastery would ever get to do a long retreat. But then there are only so many retreat rooms. So then this thing of in for 3 years, out, another lot in, started to happen. The whole story of these retreats is quite interesting. So anyway, basically, you've connected up with this Karma Kagyu lineage. How is it different from Gelugpa lineage, Nyingmapa lineage, Sakyapa lineage? What are you getting into? What's at the heart of it? You know, many people have had bad experiences getting into what's called Nukadampa. And on the outside, it seems okay. They meet nice people, lovely Dharma centers, they get the basic teachings of the Buddha, and they say, why are other people so critical? But when you look at what's at the heart of it, then there's something wrong. So here, you need to know what makes the Karma Kagyu the Karma Kagyu. And it's these two special lineages that the others don't have. They've got their own special lineages, the Gelugpas and the Shakyapas. These are what make our lineage what it is. Last week we had Mahamudra from Saraha. So now we've got all these tantric transmissions. Father, mother, non-Jew. You might think, and this is where we now get to the inner content. Well, Vajrayana, what's all that stuff? Visualizations, mantras, all these complicated things of offerings and making tormas and everything you see, people dressing up in costumes, lamas amazingly dressed up and giving empowerments, banging people on their head with pots full of water and making strange mudras with their hands and all this kind of thing. You think, oh my goodness. I mean, some people love it, but you might think, do I really need all of that? When look, there's Mahamudra. I just sit down and meditate and discover my own mind. But that's all I really want to do. Yeah, me too. What's the next word that's coming? However, or but. That's brilliant. However, where's the problem? And why did all of our Karmapas and Gampopa and Naropa, if they have Mahamudra, what are they doing messing around with all that other stuff? Why don't they just get to the heart of it? Buddha's the nature of your mind. Discover your mind. You discover Buddha. You become Buddha. Bob's your uncle. Full stop. What's the problem? You discover your truth, your Buddha mind. You. What are you? What are you? Just now. You think a lot. You have ideas. You have values. You have been conditioned by your parents, by your culture. You carry a deep conditioning from past karma that attracts you to some things, makes other things repulsive. You have fixed ideas that can get jarred. You only have the capacity for faith you have. Remember last week, 5-part Mahamudra, devotion to the Guru. It's very important. It's easy to be devoted when you're not practicing intensely. But once you're confronted with your own ignorance, your pride, your jealousy, your desire, you'll get very confused and you will resent what your guru is telling you, what your guru is doing. You might even run away for a few lifetimes. What are you? You are your energies. The whole way your biology, it's not really biology, all these feelings inside you, your reactivity and feelings that make you feel blissful and happy or make you feel so angry, beyond thinking, sometimes triggered by thinking, but you're a whole energetic complex. Everything that you are is going to be trying to discover what you truly are, which is Buddha. Everything's so pure. Buddha tells you, you've had hundreds, thousands of past lives. How comes ego survived? How come? It's a survivor. It's a survivor. It's like cockroaches. You know, they say cockroaches are some of the earliest beasts. And if the nuclear bombs go off, we'll all be destroyed, but the cockroaches will survive. Yeah, cockroaches, they're survivors. And there are these animals, I forget what they are, at the bottom of the oceans. They've barely changed since life began on Earth. Survivors. Ego is a very crafty survivor, and the cleverer your dharma gets, the craftier ego will find ways of defeating your dharma practice. It's as Horrible as that. So great, you will practice Mahamudra, and if you do everything perfectly, all 5 parts, and you follow the Samaya, you keep perfectly every word of instruction from the Buddha, from your guru. You apply it perfectly all the time. You can't go wrong. But you can go wrong because of the power of ego, which means your jealousy and your anger and your pride and your desires that are left where, yes, I want to get enlightened, but I still wouldn't mind a little bit of that on the way, if I can, a little bit of that. And maybe one lifetime when at last I can be this, be fulfilled in what feels unfulfilled, and so on. So that can get tricky because the person practicing Mahamudra can become confused in the cloud of their own history. It's not as though you've got your poisons there and your pure Dhamma Mahamudra practice there, and you can just, from a state of clarity and neutrality, use that to remedy that, like somebody in a laboratory fixing something. You are in your ego, trying hard to work with it, and it will fight back. And the more your Dharma gets strong, the more it will fight back. So this is why the path of skillful means and tantric method is so valued. Because it gives you powerful, powerful methods for dealing with your mind poisons. There's a whole teaching about tantra and what it is, how through the ages, Tilopa talked about it this year, how through the different cosmic eons, there's purity, less purity. Now we're going into the dark age and so on. And how simple Dharma is sufficient in pure times and how really complicated, powerful Dharma is needed in dark times. All of that's very interesting. We don't have time today. But Tantra gives us the methods. Gives us the methods. Imagination is so powerful in this. So powerful. What are fears but the play of our mind's imagery? What are hopes and dreams but mind's imagination? When you look at the role of your imagination in determining what you did in this life, imagination is so powerful. So Vajrayana deals with these. Excuse me, I need to look at the clock and drink some coffee. Because we've got a lot to do. Okay. I think the best way to approach it is through telling you something about highest yoga tantra. You remember in our 9 yanas, the highest one, the top one, or it was bottom in our table, is called highest yoga tantra. Father, mother, non-dual. Now, each tantric transmission, each practice like chakra sampara, vajravarahi, or whatever it is, has its own empowerments. Some of them quite complicated. If you get Naropa practice, 17 different empowerments, I think. 11 karma pakshi, and anyway, lots and lots. So, but generally, if we look at all of them, we have 4 levels of empowerment. Oh, another number. We might get all of the 1 to 10 today if we're lucky. So 4 levels of empowerment. Now, what Tibetans say is that, because I'm sure many of you have received empowerment, and you go up and you receive all 4 at once these days, symbolically. But they say in India, it didn't work like that. You receive the first level of empowerment, and then you go away and practice for months, years, as long as it takes until you've mastered that. And this is called the vase empowerment, and it's to do with manifestation. It's to do with form. Usually it takes place with a vase, a ceremonial vase, pretty vase. You get it banged on your head and you get some water poured on you. Usually you take it. But this is symbolic of purifying your body. Now, this doesn't mean this bag of meat and bones. because many great masters have received hundreds of empowerments and they still die of cancer or something else. It doesn't mean your physical body. It means the way your mind identifies with all physical manifestation. So to cut a long story short, you see yourself as you see yourself now, as you see yourself in the mirror. Although one day when you look in the mirror, you might see an angel, and the next day when you look in the mirror, you might see same mirror, same you, but you might see a devil. And the way we see each other, the way we see ourselves, the self-image, is a habit developed over all of this lifetime, and maybe even longer. And then the way we envision others is the same. We project our own delusion onto other people. We don't really see them. We've developed a preconception of them. So the first level of empowerment tackles this. The whole way that you see the world around you, the people around you, and that you see yourself in that. This whole self and other image. So we need to receive empowerment for becoming, let's say, Chinrezig. You learn to see yourself as who you truly are, the love and compassion of Buddha Chinrezig, and the world around you is pure. Everyone becomes Chinrezigs and Tara. Everything becomes a pure land. Now, if you're really practicing this, it doesn't mean that now you're going around telling yourself, Uncle Fred's pure. He looks like a rotten, miserable old git, but he's pure. Or that I'm really pure, although I think I'm ugly every time I look in the mirror. Gosh, why did I got such a nose like this? And maybe I should need surgery, You're not telling yourself that. You need to practice until you get to the point where you feel like Chinrezig. You feel like Chinrezig's love as you look at everybody, look around you. You feel in your heart all of the glow of the Chinrezig practice. And as you see other people, you see the Buddha in them. You see the Chinrezig, the Tara in them. You can't see their everyday manifestation. It's very secondary. So the first level of empowerment is your guru helping you understand this, the total reprogramming of the way that you are envisioning yourself and life. And you need to practice until you're going around as Chinrezig. And there's a very famous story told about a guy whose deity practice had big horns. And when his guru came into the retreat cave, and he said, you've been doing this for years now, you've done very well. Come outside with me for the first time. And then the guy said, but I can't get through the door anymore. My horns are so big, there's no way. So then his practice needed a bit of adjustment, but it meant that his visualization really worked. It's remedial. We are so conditioned, we can't get out of this way. We project onto others and onto ourselves, that we need that morning, noon, and night, 7 days a week, 365 days a year practice of becoming something else to take us out of impure envisioning to a pure one that corresponds to who we really are. First level of empowerment is to do with that. Then, it says in the past, when somebody had reached success, they come back and they receive the second stage of empowerment, which is called the secret empowerment. And this, there the guru tells you about your inner chakras and energy channels and the energetic being you are, and how that is behind the way we manifest and project to others, and how what's inside you, your chakras and your channels, is a microcosm of the entire universe. How inside and outside are related, and how by mastering the inside, we master the outside, like Naropa, who could perform miracles. And so we discover now that the outer manifestation, which pulled us away in desire and anger and all those things, that's sorted. Now our mind is free to be very quiet and go inside and explore the different channels and the energies that are our energies, and at the same time the universe's energies. And we master those, and in particular through what's called the inner heat, Chandali Yoga Tumo. In particular, that in the end will give rise to bliss. That bliss is very close to the bliss of enlightenment. And it is so immense and so pure that any kind of worldly desire, just peanuts, it won't interest you anymore. How could you throw away such perfect bliss for sensorial bliss? It makes no sense. So when that's mastered, which means that the person's become a real yogi and they're master of all of their energies, then they come back for the third empowerment, which is called the wisdom mind empowerment, where we go deep, 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 deep into what is mind. That's the Mahamudra part coming. And we see how actually all those energies, the channels and the chakras, was what's called the bridge between your inner state of mind and the way the universe manifests to you. It says prana is the bridge between mind and manifestation. So then the guru gives teachings on mind and the nature of mind and the Buddha nature of mind. One goes away and practices that. And then comes the last empowerment when that's mastered, which is called the word empowerment, where now all three of these are worked on in synergy. Manifestation, which becomes Nimanakaya, the chakras and the channels, which becomes real bodhicitta and Sambhogakaya, and then the inner depths of what mind really is, its pure Dhammadhatu nature, Dhammakaya, and then all three together as one essential thing called Svabhavikakaya. So that helps us understand how these practices deal with everything we are, the way our thoughts and mind and projections and imagination works, our inner energies which give rise to our emotions and feelings and so on, and mind itself, which we were ignorant of, the truth of mind until this. So now we've got a little bit of time left to actually look at no, where is that? I've got a piece of paper somewhere. Here, maybe. No, not that one. Transmissions. No, not that. Excuse me just a moment. Okay. Where have you gone? This one. Okay, I was there anyway. So this is the supplement I sent you with the 9 yanas. And sorry, I'm scrolling down. Okay. The 8 great chariots, you can see them there. This is interesting, by the way. It shows how these were the 8 great transmissions from India to Tibet. And how, look, how so many of them were absorbed into the Kagyu lineage over time. For instance, the Nimapa lineage with the 3rd Karmapa, who was also a great Nimapa master, the Kadampa through Gampopa. And then the pacifying, this is the Chut practice, how that was integrated. Anyway, you've got that. Now the 6 yogas. How are we going to use these 6 main teachings from Tilopa via Naropa and so on through Mapa and through the Karmapas? The basis for them really is this practice called Tummo. It's Chandali in Sanskrit, and it doesn't really translate. In the early ones, they were calling it wrathful granny, wrathful grandmother, which is, what are you practicing, wrathful grandmother? I mean, it doesn't really. So, and then because the physical manifestation is heat, then and yogis who can, like Milarepa, be in the snow, then it's sometimes called heat yoga. And on a practical level, it did enable Indian yogis and Tibetan yogis to survive the cold of the mountains, because it carries bodily heat to the extremities and keeps you warm. I took part in a conference once with a very, very interesting Professor Benson from Harvard. He spent a lot of his life investigating this. And in particular, he found what he thought were some of the most proficient yogis these days in Nepal. So he connected them up, he's a Harvard professor, so connected them up with all of the senses and so on. And these yogis were not just practicing it awake, they were practicing it in their sleep, outdoors, in the cold. And this professor, he was professor of medicine, he was saying a normal person just now will be turning blue and they'd be starting to shiver. And then at this stage, they'd lose consciousness. And these guys are asleep, they're sleeping, they're actually asleep and their bodies are warm and the temperature shows, they've got the sensors on them. It's physically, it's fascinating, but that is not the point. It's a byproduct, a very useful byproduct. The purpose of this is to purify your channels and your chakras, and in the process to purify intensely all your past karmas, which are carried in this biological history that is our chakras and channels. So it's a means to get down to the real heart of it, the energetic heart of everything you are, and to keep your mind held strictly without the slightest detour in what's called the central channel or in pure awareness. And from that place, purify everything you are down to 72,000 tiny branch channels. So it's there, as it says, to work on the inner chakras, channels, and vital essences, to break free of karma, to break free of mind patterns, so as to directly experience pure mind, and to use this inner energetic basis for other practices. Now, it's actually based on breath control, special use of the breath, and combine that with visualization. It comes from the Hevajra Tantra. So this is of the various Indian tantras that comes through to us. This is Hevajra Tantra, and Tilopa received this from Krishnacharya. Let's go quickly through the rest, although you've got the text, so not much point me reading it, because you've got it. Illusory body. This deals with manifestation, and it's a training in how we see things in a fixed way. So we learn to see everything as a mirror image, or like a dream, or like a conjuration. And those teachings were from Lavapa. Dream yoga. So illusory body and Tummo we do in the daytime. Dream yoga is at night, of course. In some ways, it's similar to lucid dreaming. So one needs to recognize the fact that you are dreaming and then be lucid, so in control, and then able to transform dreams. In particular, this is so important, it's there to overcome any fear that the mind might still have. But the main point, and this we don't find in modern lucid dreaming training, because people can't do it in daytime, so they can't do it in nighttime. The ultimate truth, your Buddha nature, to realize that in dream. In dream. If we go back to the tumo, one of the side effects when it's really good is that when you're asleep but not dreaming, then you will recognize the nature of mind in deep sleep. Clarity or clear light is how when the mind goes deep inside, so normally that's when we go inside, we imagine, we fantasize, we remember. It's how the mind can experience spiritual wonders, let's say. You'll see many things that human beings don't see as the mind goes through the great spiritual landscape. So this came from Nagarjuna, Yogi Nagarjuna, and Lavapa. The last two are to do with death and dying. One is instructions about what happens to the mind in between lives and how, while those various things are happening, how to recognize the Buddhakayas. We had some of this in our Dying as Best We Can course. And then there's Poa, transference of consciousness, that came from Sukhasiddhi, like the Bada teachings. And this is one method to very energetically eject your consciousness at the time of death, so it goes to a pure land. So that briefly, those briefly are the 6 transmissions, the 6 yogas. And one more to say, they're the ones that have been handed down. Now, come back to the main point. When you do those in retreat, you are practicing the practice you're doing 18 hours a day. You have a special yoga room. You learn the various vigorous physical exercises that can help you line up your chakras and do special things. You need the space and the privacy to do those very secret, very powerful practices. You are at least 18 hours a day focused on that. And that one-pointed focus is going to help you achieve Mahamudra. Now, what my teacher, Khenpo Sotim Jamso, said when he was teaching about the 6 yogas and about Mahamudra, I don't know much about the 6 yogas, but what he did teach us, he said, in the end, the 6 yogas are like a ladder to take you to the roof. The roof is Mahamudra. And when you get there, you can throw the ladder away. You don't need to go back down. You don't want to go back down into samsara and suffering and all of the misery, confinement of that. It's all about Mahamudra. The Mahamudra path, just on your mind, can take you there. The 6 yogas path can take you there. What my teachers tell me is that these 2 paths were taught quite separately in retreats. Some people were taught the 6 yogas. Other people, pure, were taught Mahamudra. But as the centuries went by, they became fused in retreat. And generally it means people are taught the 6 yogas because there you've got a very complicated, very structured program. You do a year of foundation practices and then various guru yogas to connect you with Mapa, Milarepa, and so on. And then you do Vajravarahi practice for a year, which is a big opening up and leaving of samsaric conditioning. Then in the 3rd year, you do chakra samvara and all of these 6 yoga practices. So somebody will be going through all of that program, but if the teacher sees at one point that they are ready to be shown the nature of their mind, the direct path of Mahamudra, then that's what will happen. And from then on, you don't need to be following the program. You need to be learning to stay as many moments of the day, more and more, in the absolute purity of Mahamudra, because that solves everything. So two separate lineages, sarahas, tilopas, but they become used as a fusion. Deepest practices that ever came from India, beautifully embodied in our lineage, full of blessing. And I hope, as lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes go by, that we gain this insight into manifestation, insight into our inner energies, insight into the nature of mind, and that we become more and more a window for the activity of all of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas to help all of our fellow beings, because the suffering is so immense. The powerful methods and pure friends are very, very needed. Sonam diye tamche zikpani, topneni pedranam pamchene, jega nache palak chukpayi, sipe sole, drowa drowarasho, janchup semcho rinpoche, maje panam je jorchi, jepa nyampa me padam, kongne kongdu palwarasho. Gewa diye nyotuto, chacha chempo krobjone, drowa chichang malupa, te sala kavarasho. So